Thank you very much. Bien sûr, je vais faire la conférence en français. C'est pas un problème. Hein? No. I'm just kidding, but as I'm not as fluent in English as I am in French or German, I have a paper, you see, because, well, I need it to make myself understand. Okay? So I will start, and I indeed changed a little bit the title of my keynote. I called it Punk Poetics on Social Networks. Capitalism is the virus. The punk movement likes to proclaim it rejects the accepted norms of politics and economics. Nevertheless, as we can see in this photo taken recently in a pedestrianized street in Germany, punk paradoxically needs the capitalist ecosystem in order to exist. It chooses to show off its mohawk, piss on the bins, and give passers-by the finger, surrounded by fast food joints and fast food fashion stores. But what does this have to do with social media? For a number of years now, I've been watching out for flashes of literature on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok, the most commercial and widespread social media platforms. I've always been convinced that these flashes exist because I experienced them myself as both a reader and a writer. But I found it hard to put into words what truly characterizes them, apart from their obvious, instantaneous, and participatory nature. I've been following recent academic discussions about the work of writers like Rupi Kaur and Atticus with great interest. You perhaps know these writers, they are really famous. Both made their names on Instagram and have had best-selling books of their online output published. Defenders of Rupi Kaur's work point out that she joins a long list of successful women writers of color who would never have gained public recognition without the help of social media. Others criticize the mainstream nature of her wildly successful work. Sensations like Rupi Kaur illustrate the fact that capitalism always manages to get its grubby hands on those on the margins to make money of them. In particular, Insta poetry undermines the widely accepted stance in digital literature circles that up until now has been voluntarily edgy and nonconformist, and highly critical to the entertainment industry. Reading Insta poetry, a great book published in 2022, summed up this controversy very well. I really recommend this book to you. It's very clear and interesting about the issues of Insta poetry. While it is true that many star writers on social media are from ethnic or gender minorities, can forms of expression that buy into the capitalist attention game in both form and content be considered to be literature? Another recurring criticism relates to the formatting that writing has to conform to on social media platforms. While digital literature tends to highlight and value the art of coding, pinpointing the literary value of the virtuosity of the program written by the author, can it also recognize the literary value of texts where the author has no control over the form of the publication ecosystem and no access to the algorithms that run them? Well, it seems to me that while all these critical approaches are valid, they neglect certain aspects that, in my opinion, form the basis of the literary nature of the pieces published on commercial social media platforms. So, admittedly, the capitalism inherent to these platforms scoops up anything that starts off on the edges and monetizes it. It's a fact. Much like the business of fashion integrated certain elements of punk. Writers like Rupi Kaur or Atticus or shaking up the Instagram system about as much as Vivienne Westwood, for example, shook up the fashion system. Not so much, indeed. Huh? Not really. Consequently, despite appearances, all literature on social media platforms is not necessarily punk. The theory I would like to put forward today is that certain forms, even on the most popular networks, nevertheless perpetuate an aesthetic and poetry that is typically punk. The punk poet on X, Instagram, or TikTok is not a hacker trying to crack the system. They know they will never succeed. The literary nature of their work is not inherent to their writing. It comes from the clash that occurs within the network's ecosystem. And it is profoundly linked to the notion of the profile. We are touched by this clash because part of it does not come from the poet's work. It comes, above all, from the way our own behavior is profiled on social media. Near the end of my talk, I will demonstrate a poetic method to examine the literally calculated settings where this poetic clash can occur. We ourselves are, in part, responsible for building this setting, and we can, in a way, take back control of it. I will use 3 examples to back up my arguments. When I log on to X in the morning, at the top of my feed, I generally see posts from weekend poetry. Sometimes this profile, run by the French poet Marie-Laure Dagois, posts a photo of the view of the Eiffel Tower from her window. Quite the view, you might think. But regular readers know that Dagois just recently moved into a tiny attic room, the only space a poet in Paris can afford. And the only upside is the view. Thanks to her daily updates, we get to follow the wanderings, musings, and encounters that form the basis of her writing. For example, in this sequence, so you will see the sequence on my newsfeed. Oh, I don't see my mouse. Oh.
It's up there.
Ah. No, it's on the video, you see. Yeah, it's on the video, but I don't have another mouse. Oh, it's not a problem. I will try to handle it. Yeah. So, yeah. So weekend poetry also holds forth on the precarious nature of her life as an independent publisher and writer, even if she is an important figure in French counterculture. She writes, indeed, pornographic literature and essays. And singer-songwriters like Rodolphe Berger, who are quite well known in France, perform her songs, and she also produces handmade box sets of books in her studio. But still, she writes that her profession, her real profession, is stealing from the dishes. Huh? Another poet whose work I've been following on X for the past few years is Croispat, also called Hervé. I remember a photo posted by Croispat a few years ago of the legs of passers-by walking down a pedestrianized street. It struck me because the point of view was that of someone sitting on the ground with their legs crossed. It was the point of view of a homeless person, and Croispat does indeed live in the street. His status often details his everyday life. The existential struggle for a few coins, the boredom, the immobility, the distress of a man living on the edge of our world and observing us. For example, in this post, when he writes, "All I know is that when all this is over, rather than twiddling my thumbs 17 times, I'm gonna walk away, like I'm sneaking out where the grass is growing, and it grows obstinately. Croispat built his identity as a poet on X, formerly Twitter, and his poetic fragments caught the eye of a publisher. Nevertheless, having his work published did not rescue him from the street. He often worries his readers with references to suicide. Just like Marie-Laure Dagois, Hervé is profoundly alone. And the platform resonates with solitude. As witnesses, we are touched and powerless when we read, for example, I'm near the end. I want to die. I want to fuck the whole world. Who's coming? To support me, to take care of me, or just to make some love under my veil of dawn. My third example is Jean-Pierre Balp, the Facebook profile of a writer who is now 82 years old. As a writer who was close to the French avant-garde movements of the 20th century, he has been experimenting with the disruptive potential of the computer for 60 years. For the past 15 years, he has been posting on Facebook at more or less the same time every day. Every single day. Huh? Jean-Pierre Balp's Facebook writings are a continuation and a culmination of the writer's reflections on contemporary identity, a topic he has worked on throughout his whole career. To begin with, he has two similarly named profiles on the platform, Jean-Pierre Balp and Balp Jean-Pierre. Furthermore, one of the most regular commentators on the status updates posted by the two Balps is Rachel Charles, who is in fact the writer again, using a third profile, his female double in a way. Posts on these three Facebook accounts often echo one another, as you can see in the examples published here. This creates a fascinating mirror effect that deconstructs the aura of authenticity that so many writers give to their autobiographical output on social media. Well, unlike the three I just mentioned, I will not be analyzing today the profiles of Atticus and Rupi Kaur in any detail, as they have been largely written about already. While star writers do get exposure, they also attract academic criticism that tends to point out the pitfalls of this orchestrated fascination. Quite a paradox indeed, you see. The three French language writers, Weekend Poetry, Croispat and Jean-Pierre Balp, are a lot less well known. Obviously, this does not automatically make them better poets. We agree. Before trying to define what constitutes the specific and authentically punk poetic nature of their work, let's first take a look at what they have in common with the Instagram stars Rupi Kaur and Atticus. To begin with, all five profiles are closely linked to the framework and canons of the platform from which they first emerged. The way they have been received reveals some of the well-documented downsides of social media in general. All five writers find themselves regularly targeted by ableist, sexist, classist, and ageist hate speech. Weekend Poetry, for example, comes under fire for the liberties she takes as a female writer of pornographic texts, as if living as an eternal student in a tiny attic room is something she deserves. Rupi Kaur's poetry is referred to as cheap and undeserving of the term poetry, an accusation that is never expanded on in the comments. Croispat is suspected of faking his homelessness just because he has a book published. Secondly, All the 5 characters embody a character. Yeah, all the 5 writers embody a character on the network in their profiles. And all social network profiles play with the line between reality and fiction, more or less intentionally. This means that from one day to the next, all 5 character profiles experience a social reality and a temporality shared by their readers. Their actions in the constantly updated ecosystem of the feed have real and constant effects. Rupi Kaur, like you and I, has been following the atrocities being committed in the war in Gaza, and she comments on them regularly. Khwaspat is cold in the winter, is seriously affected by rising prices, like you and me, and recently commented on the new Pope's first television appearance. Profiles are not people, however. They are the framework on which we hang identity-based projections. The charm of social networks, the same charm that millions of readers around the world fall under every day, comes from this blend of flashes of fact and fiction, orchestrated through the funding central concept of the profile. I found it quite strange when Khwaspat first left me a voice message to conclude our discussions about the Pope and the Catholic Church in France. It was as if a character in a play had for a short time left the stage to whisper an aside in my ear. So I let you access this voice message, even if it's in French, because Khwaspat has a very beautiful voice. You will see.
Bonsoir, Alexandra Saemmer. Du coup, je peux faire un petit vocal. Comme je passe mon temps à écrire, au bout d'un moment, j'en ai marre d'écrire. Donc, du coup, un vocal, ça peut être sympa, sympathique. Oui, je sais pas. Qu'est-ce que tu veux poster pour la route, comme tu dis? Vas-y, j'attends avec impatience. Tout de suite.
Among the five writers, star poet Atticus and Jean-Pierre Balp give autobiographical mask play the most central role. Atticus posts photos in which his body is exposed, but his face is covered. He explains his choices in the following manner. I posted it online under the name Atticus. Why? Because I like the name. Not long after, I was offered my first book deal, and my publisher said, "You should take off the mask. You will sell 1 million books." But all I could think of was why, for who, and at what cost. So I kept the mask on. Well, in the end, the mask has not prevented him from selling millions of copies of his books. And it seems to me that by hiding his face, the writer pretends to something approaching the eternal, the universal, as he says himself. The mask isn't about hiding. It's about creating space for something greater than me. Very modest approach, indeed. Huh? By portraying himself as eternally young and attractive, Atticus wants to provide a surface onto which his readers can project their fantasies. His life, documented as it is by pictures and writing, is realer than real, and as such needs a protective veil. I is not another in this case, which is precisely the reason why Atticus has to hide his face. In sharp contrast to Atticus, Jean-Pierre Balp exposes in his short and sometimes very raw pieces the horrors of aging and death, always referring to himself in the third person. All of his confessions are accompanied by signals that are supposed to alert us to the fact that the text does not manage to capture the real flow of life. In the case of Jean-Pierre Balp, I is decidedly another, and this is why he can show his face sometimes without a protective veil. But what the 5 writers have in common, despite the differences, the big difference in postures, is the fact that the literary nature of their work does not come from each one of their posts. So considering only the posts concentrating to the texts alone would mean we miss, in my opinion, that we miss what forms the essence of social media literature. Firstly, the way it is embodied through profiles, the production of which is often vast and mixed, made up of reposts, comments on current affairs, friendship requests, and traces of personal intimacies. And secondly, and that's my pinpoint today, the way the writing appears within our own feed, within our profile as a reader. This is for me the very basis of the poetics of social media literature. So it's not in the text, it's in the feed. So let's go to the poeticity or the poetics of the newsfeed. There are indeed 2 ways to access the work of a poet on a social media. The first is simply by connecting directly to their profile, to Croispat on X, for example, and reading his personal posts, one after another. His feed is presented in the form of an anti-chronology, like a blog. So the relatively traditional mode of reading, made possible by his personal feed, can easily be reproduced in paper format. You only need to extract the elements one after another, and that's exactly what his publisher did. However, and this is my point, this is not how we read on social media platforms in the real world. And you all know that. The second mode of reading, the most common one, involves logging on your own profile. For example, for me, the profile Alexandra Saemmer. The feed does not contain my own posts, of course. It contains instead status updates from other profiles. On mainstream social media platforms, the posts on a newsfeed are first of all prioritized according to our behavior as a reader, and secondly, according to whatever the social media in question wants us to see, for its own commercial and political reasons. Because I don't just follow Croispat on X, but I also regularly like and comment, his posts often appear at the top of my newsfeed. However, they are surrounded by a wide range of other posts from the newspapers, pages and profiles I follow, as well as the usual propaganda, of course, fake news, pseudo-spectacular videos, and all the other bullshit you commonly find on X. Consequently, on April 8, a video appeared right at the top of my feed, posted by the leftist French political party La France Insoumise, followed by a post from a profile I didn't recognize, a certain Robert, who I do not follow, criticizing the way some left-leaning demonstrators wear masks to avoid identification by the police. The story of a morning walk posted by Croispat appeared just under these 2 posts, the tone of which is overrode in the manner of social media posts. So, Croispat just here, followed by a quotation posted by Weekend Poetry that commemorates a lost love. And just under that, it's business as usual on X, with a video showing an incident in a stadium, an ad for an electricity supplier, and other pseudo-spectacular posts. My next dive will be into my Facebook feed. For you, perhaps it will be a little bit vintage. So my Facebook feed on Wednesday, March 12th. Right at the top of my feed And you see, it's very, very personal, as I really revealed something of me. There's a status update from Michel Kokorev, a sociologist, colleague, and a very good friend, about the way French universities are mobilizing against the state testing organization. Next, we have an advertisement for Levi's. Well, exactly the same jeans I wore yesterday. What a coincidence, huh? A status update from a page of art lovers, some do-it-yourself advice, an ad for jumpers, photos of strangers, some photos of an art opening I missed, but that appears to have been attended by lots of beautiful people. It will appear here. And just after that, a status update from Jean-Pierre Balp, who declares laconically that he is on the edges of the world. Reality TV characters line up on my feed just after that post with the usual fake smiles plastered on their faces. So you see that taken out of context, this short post by Jean-Pierre Balp can appear quite ordinary. Jean-Pierre Balp even told me once that many of his posts are generated automatically. However, on the reader's feed, so for example on my news feed, the posts resonate and start making sense in contrast with the smiling faces and overblown poses that precede and follow them. It is within this universe of nonsense, of spectacular trash and fake authenticity that they stand out and have meaning for me, that they are indeed poetic, you see? So to sum up, a piece of literature on social media cannot be reduced to the status updates posted by its author. It includes the profile characters apparatus, their feed journal, their biographical details, their friend lists, likes, loves and comments, but also, and I insist on this point, each profile reader's feed. It literally takes place in the middle of a bunch of content and strategies that have nothing to do with literature, but everything to do with us. No two feeds are the same, as their composition is conditioned in part on commercial and political issues, and in part by our behaviors profiled by the social media in question. So no one feed looks like another within the same network, but every social network nevertheless has its own specific atmosphere. So I come to my last point. Can we probe this atmosphere of a social network in a perceptible way in order to get a read on what the intrusion of literature causes within it? And here I come to a proposal I want to make. It's a methodology I developed recently, and I already tested with my student, and it works quite well. Many of my students use it, and they really like it, so I wanted to present it to you. And this methodology is called feed cut. So, and you can do it even now if you want. On most of the industrial social networks, we agree, the feed is strictly personal to each reader. It's simply not possible to get an overview, which is quite incredible to think about. We are just so used to it that we never reflect on this, but it's incredible. We cannot have an overview. So there's no such thing as a panoptic view of all the posts on a given network. Never. Among the rare exceptions, the social media platform Mastodon. I don't know if you use this. Yeah, an independent Fediverse offers a feed that includes all the posts made of an instance or a server in chronological order. On all the other platforms, Instagram, TikTok, X, Snapchat, Facebook, the feed's ecosystem transmits strategies aimed at audience grabbing, control and manipulation all at once, and reflects something of ourselves, as I already said, of our tastes and preferences. So the balance varies according to each network's policy and according to each reader's behavior. And the feed cut is a poetic tool that can be used to reveal this policy and at the same time your own behavior. So when I want to make a feed cut, it's very simple. I log into my profile on the social network of my choice, and I copy the first posts that feature on my personal feed. You do not sound right. Okay. So my medium of choice, my personal medium of choice is writing. So I do not use the pictures, even though they are of great importance on social networks. So if you do your own feed cut, for example, you can also use the pictures or the videos, and the result will be quite interesting too. So some of my students, for example, they use the pictures and the video when they make feed cuts. So you understand the issue, the technique is very, very simple. Huh? I choose some sequences of the posts, one after another. For example, the first 10 or the first 15 posts. I copy it in a Word document, for example, and then I begin to shape them. A slice here, an interjection there, a cry from the heart, today's news flash, an insult, a slogan, a clash, an ad. I take whatever catches my eye. I call this technique a feed cut, of course, as a nod to William Burroughs' cut-up technique. So Burroughs' cut-up technique involved using cuttings from newspapers and magazines in order to defy the traditional authority of the writer and demystify the myth of the creative genius, close to what Kenneth Goldsmith referred to as uncreative writing. But demystification is not the central objective of my feed cuttings on social networks. It's more a meditation on our reading habits and on the atmosphere of a social network. So using the cut-up technique on a social media feed imitates the process of impatient reading that constantly pushes us further down the feed. When we scroll, all know that, and we discussed it yesterday. Yeah? When we scroll, we only half understand certain things, and in the end, it all blends into one. By extracting some elements from the quagmire, I'm attempting to give them back a kind of meaning, for better and sometimes for worse. Because I'm harsh when I'm cutting, and that's sometimes even violent, because I'm not aiming to create beauty using materials we know are already infected. So the following is a feed cut I did on my X profile on May 16th. So you see that the initial writers of the cut pieces are cited. I can make the demonstration of the creative process of that, but I do not really have my mouse, but perhaps I can manage it. I will see. Yeah, we will see. So you have the translation of the French posts here. Yeah. So I translated it for you. You have also the initial authors of the posts. And here you have the news feed of X where I cut it off. Okay? So I will make the demonstration, and I cannot stop the process because I don't have my mouse on the screen, but yes, I have it. I have it. Oh, what a miracle. Yeah, he stands up and I have it. Yeah. That's fantastic. You're magic. So, it's all about aura. Exactly. So I didn't grasp the very first one. It was from Hervé, and it said, j'avais cette impression, I've got this impression. And then, il est beau. He's gorgeous, the second post. Even with a dress même avec une robe. A suit and even a little shave, cross-pattes, hein? Literal meanings depress me, still cross-path. Juliet, age 23, is wow. For a long time, I sulked Emmy from Norway. It was random, huh? I swear. We missed this one, but it's important. Albania's prime minister kneels before Meloni. No. I decided it would be better to kneel before Greta Thunberg. The biggest sale of the year. It's simple. Et voici une icône. And here's an icon. Ne riez pas. Don't laugh. So that's how it works, you see? So in the middle of the wow-based bullshit, the fake news about Greta Thunberg, the degrading political commentary, and the sleazy adverts, it is reassuring to see that Croispat is getting ready for a date, not with me, huh? And that Weekend Poetry is thrilled with her new shoes. You saw? Huh? The poetic nature of their posts continues to resonate in my feed cut. But I have far fewer regrets about cutting through the outrageous news and giving it a parodic spin, as you noticed. Furthermore, I spent so much time on their daily posts that I can see that 5 out of the first 13 posts on X come from my favorite 2 poets. My behavior indeed influenced the composition of the mirror the network holds up to me, to a certain extent anyway. So regular feed cuts both help to capture some of the atmosphere on social networks and can contribute to shaping that atmosphere. You see? So, and that's why I encourage you really to do feed cuts on your own newsfeed of your favorite social network, while making a conscious choice as what you want to insist on by cutting. Because it can be very revealing, but it can also be effective as a form of resistance. You will see. And with my students at Paris 8 and some students from Quebec, we want to make a little book of feed cut poetry. So if you have some nice results, send it to me with your name, and we perhaps can figure out a publication with feed cuts, because it would be very interesting, very revealing about the feeds and about you and about the atmospheres on social networks. And really, when I do it with students, they are all so different. All these poems are so different from mine, for example. It's really very interesting. So, to finish up, I will go back to where I started, and there's one question I have not yet answered. I pinpointed the poetics in literature and social media, both in the connection that is woven between the poetic fragment and the embodiment of the profile character, and in the contrasts, collisions, and convergences that this fragment produces on the reader's personal feed. But what it is about some of these poetics that gives them a punk aesthetic. In order to illustrate this aspect, I would like you to, first of all, take a look at a post on my Instagram feed from the very famous poet Atticus. To be honest, I didn't even notice the status update from Atticus at first because his aesthetic is so similar to that of the platform. You will see. It's not this one, it's an advert, and then comes Atticus, you see? And even if it's in black and white, the photo he posted to go with the text reminded me of a perfume ad with the actor Johnny Depp. You see? It's just striking, huh? Now, let's look at a post from Quaspat, commenting another that was reminding us not to forget all the mums on Mother's Day. Not only does Quaspat point out that Mother's Day do not fall on the same date in every country for commercial reasons, of course, he also affirms that had it been Mother's Day in France, he would have gladly gone to piss on his own mother's grave. Well, this is punk poetics, you see? As for weekend poetry, among the day's political trash posts, she recently posted a micro-publication very ironically entitled Poème Pidou, in reference to the French President Georges Pompidou, who had the Pompidou Center in Paris built, a temple of contemporary, very expensive, very bourgeois art. This is what I mean when I talk about clashes being authentically punk, you see? Mm-hmm. So punk indeed needs a pedestrianized street with shops and people in a rush to spend money. Punk needs respectable bourgeois art to exist as a counterculture. When we cut a post out of the feed's ecosystem, it lies there like a moth between two plates of glass. It loses all its vitality. Its poetic nature comes to the fore in the middle of all the trash and the triviality on social networks. So according to Caroline de Kergariou, punk is much more serious than it appears. It's a generation's answer to a used-up world, where even the counterculture values, militantism and revolution, no longer have any meaning. So in the overheated and polarized world of social media, the nihilism of punk is more than ever a provocation. A provocation to the capitalist system at the top, but also a provocation to all forms of ambient overexcitement, whether we find it politically correct or not. So, I finished. Thank you very much.